Right on the desk there. We're going to get this game underway. Kenobi, I'm stoked.
I am too. I mean, after that presentation Johnny gave us about looking like very Steve Jobs-esque about the future of, the iPhone, American Overwatch, I think that this is going to be a great matchup between Toronto and New York. I think Toronto, the desk touched on it a little bit, the synergy is really there with this team, especially when you have such a good foundation in the players that are coming from that American Tornado core, right? They've all played together a very long time. And I think in the current meta, especially with the dives that we're having and very much Monkey, Mira, Sombra, Tracer, that execution and that crispiness in those dives, very, very important. And it's something, unfortunately, for the New York Excelsior that they've lacked a little bit. So hopefully in the week coming into this matchup, they've kind of got some grease on those wheels and those dives are going to look a little bit more clean, because if not, I think just Toronto will out synergy the entirety of New York Excelsior. Yeah,
cleanliness is what we really need to see from them. Well-oiled, absolutely, as we are going to enter into our first match of Control, which is going to be Antarctic Peninsula. And it's almost a, kind of revisitation for us. We've been seeing a lot of these players from the collegiate and the tier 2 scene for so long, and now being able to get to see them on this main stage, you and I, it's going to be a thrill to be able to go into this first round of Control.
And this is a map in our Antarctic Peninsula where we see a lot of these brawl types of compositions, right? We trend away from, more of those Winston compositions. And I think this is definitely favorable for Toronto because of that synergy that they have as a unit, right? These are compositions that rely very heavily on cooldown usage, on understanding of when you need to be using those cooldowns to move forward when you have those advantages. So we'll see if New York Excelsior can match up a little bit in this scenario. Interestingly, looks like Fitz is going to be coming out on the Ashe, which is a good read, I think, for actually both of these teams. It's interesting that we're going to be playing Ashe in this enclosed area, but those dynamites should be able to get a lot of value in these enclumped areas. And the thing that I also like is that we're seeing from New York Excelsior creative on that Ana. Jake talked about it a little bit on the desk. Ana, creative's best hero, currently second in sleep dart rate. So that is something that we have to look out for in this matchup, is creative being able to hit those sleep darts, because you look at Toronto, there's not really a way to block any of them.
No, there's not. And you can see Kaluj already down, pushing towards that point, looking for an opportunity to dive in onto this. You do have Kellen, though, with this Ramatra holding the doorway for the moment. Hydron looking for a decent sight line to get the advantage against them and start really putting in that damage to start generating towards that ultimate. Not really too clean of a position to get those shots just yet, until down below almost gets the pickup onto Psycho, but now looks to draw back to this initial position. No one yet really finding the best opportunity to lean into this with the most advantageous opportunity. It gets a pickup, though, onto Hydra, and that's a great way to lean into this. And you can already see the commanding shout used defensively to try and get out.
Really good patience as well. Kellen is getting taken down relatively low, but Creative is going to have Nano relatively soon, and he's been pumping out this healing incredibly quickly, so much so that Nano is going to be available for the next fight. And you can see Hydron actually opting away from that Ashe, doesn't want to match up with Fitz in that mat, and now is going to be going over to that Hanzo. A little bit more survivability, a little bit more one-shot potential that you're losing for the utility of the Dynamite.
And you can see just that offensive prowess that comes in from New York, able to get OG so low, but Hydron with this switch gets the pickup on Talep. The nano boost has been committed into this onto Fitz, so there is that influx of damage, but it's being really problematic. Nice counter with the Bionid from Creative to get OG out of the mix of this, and speedily goes down amongst the chaos with even the Rampage committed.
Oh, Hydron is able to get 2, though. Fitz is still around in this fight. Bob is almost ready for them if they can find him, but Hydron cleans it up with a 3K, and I think this switch also from Hydron really smart in the aspect of Toronto Defiant wants to play a little bit more in that enclosed area, right? And something that Hanzo does a little bit more well is plays more in that mid-range, right? Ashe, you have to kind of stay back, hit those dynamites, but if Hydron can be aggressive and kind of take those angles away from Fitz with the rest of the team, that's going to negate a little bit of Fitz's value, specifically on that Ashe with those sight lines. But as we come to this next fight, Bob is going to be available for Fitz, and there's not really anything that Toronto has to block it.
Nope, gonna have it just clustered in that left-hand side from the attacking position, moving in with Ultraviolet committing in this Kitsune rush, giving the opportunity to force back a lot of New York. Psycho gets a pickup onto OG, though. Without the sound barrier in this, it becomes so much more challenging to weather the storm that New York is going to bring into this. But if Hydron, as we've seen last week and going into this week, getting these types of picks and shutting it down, it's going to be that much more challenging. But Annihilation is guaranteed an insurance policy to take that.
And the target focus from New York Excelsior has been great. That's the second time in these last 2 fights that OG has died with the sound barrier in their back pocket. So New York Excelsior knows that they want to be able to take that cooldown down very quickly. Psycho's doing a great job of focusing it down. And as New York Excelsior take up past this 60% here. They're coming up towards another pulse bomb from Psycho. Creative's about to have a nano boost as well, but this would be a moment where I'd like to see Toronto get a little bit aggressive here. Use that sound barrier, tempo in, and take away this positioning from Toronto, or from New York Excelsior.
Early dynamite as well. So got some chip damage. There's the sound barrier. As you mentioned, slept onto Kalush for a minor second, but Psycho still just peppering in these shots over and over again onto Kalush, making them have to play so defensively. Look at how low they get, and the stick is there to guarantee it. Psycho shuts them out and is still able to take this with only 20% left.
An absolutely fantastic disengage from New York Excelsior, right? You saw Toronto Defiant. They wanted to go aggressive, use that sound barrier and tempo in, but they just aren't able to get any of the kills, and then New York Excelsior come back in like a rubber band, and we're at 90% desperate swap already for Collusion and Ultraviolet. They're going on to different heroes, just trying to desperately get a pick potentially in this moment.
And we'll see if they're able to gain something. No real ultimates available. Ultraviolet nearing at least the nano boost to generate an opportunity of switching this back, forcing most of New York Excelsior back, giving some decent distance with this Winston play from Collusion. Nicely onto the point. Can Kellen get shut down? They are still surviving with the defenses while in Nemesis form eliminated and swapped over to Toronto Defiant.
And that was a great anti-nade specifically from Ultraviolet, taking down Kellen, putting all that pressure onto them, which is something that I think now with this composition, Toronto Defiant can do a little bit more of, right? They can play a little bit more enclosed, and look at this aggression that we're seeing from them, trying to take as much positioning away from the New York Excelsior. As we come back into this one, Toronto Defiant has a treasure trove of ultimates to work with. I mean, the Nano is going to be the biggest one. You can throw that onto the Winston to get the Primal Rage, or you can throw it onto Hydron, who can just freak with something like an Overclock, right? So there's a lot of options here, and New York Excelsior don't really have too many in their own right. Left needs to find a way to get to this sound barrier in time.
And curious to see how Excelsior is going to be able to function against this variety of options that Toronto Defiant has. Bionade lands onto Kalush, playing defensively. Nano onto Hydron with the overclock, needing to clean up, but can't quite land the mark just yet. Creative is super low as well as left. There is an early takedown, 1-for-1 trade on the DPS, and Bob was committed into this. Now, right with these last 10% still to go for Toronto Defiant, Psycho has the pulse bomb, looking to see who's the primary target. Kalush getting low. There's the stick on the sleep, but still alive. Primal comes out in time to give that extra buffer of health to withstand the explosion, and it's still leaning in favor of Toronto Defiant. They're taking the numbers. The Annihilation, though, back onto the point, zoning them away, attempting to swap this back as it's a 99 into the overtime. With OG gone, they switch it back. Kalush wasn't there. You still have Speedily maneuvering underneath alongside, but Kalush is barely able to stick alive. What a sleep to deny the damage, so Kalush gets that extra minor few seconds to hold on to this point. That was wonderfully done by the assistants in the support line. Ultraviolet has absolutely turned this around.
That was such a disgusting sleep, and the Nano into Speedily should be able to enough with the sound barrier clean this one up. Unreal play from the supports of the Toronto Defiant, which we talked about. I mean, if you're talking about best buds, OG and Ultraviolet, I mean, what a support duo that was. If Ultraviolet does not hit that sleep, Fitz instantly kills Kalush, and there's almost no way back for the Defiant in that regard. So what an extremely well-played situation coming in from the supports of the Toronto Violent. Ultraviolet, I think when they move over to the Ana, like Ultraviolet is very clean on the Kiriko, but I think with where Ana is in the current meta, I love seeing Ultraviolet on this pick, right? We know going back to way back to American Tornado, even us watching him on ISU, like these plays are insane as we're gonna see this replay here.
Oh, so
just
brilliant.
Absolutely beautiful.
Just look
at Kalush's health. Look at Kalush's health. He's about to die in that scenario. I mean, this is, remember back in Pro-Am where we saw him do something similar, right?
Yeah.
On Blizzard World, just instantly sleep someone like that. Absolutely unreal play as Toronto Defiant. It was close. I will give credit to the New York Excelsior, though. That was very close until Toronto Defiant made some swaps. But here we go, a little bit more mano-y-mano with both of these teams. And with the Ramatra, the Maywalls here are going to be incredibly impactful. That's really the thing I'm going to be looking out for once we get to these more brawly type of areas. But Fitz is able to take down Speedily, so that means no wall right now. And that's the beauty of the Hanzo. You can sometimes find these long-range shots and just get a pick instantly and win a fight.
Very compelling out the gate from New York as they are now able to capitalize on this initial point. 4 Icebreaker rotating underneath. Kalush still getting a couple of decent shots onto them to reduce the health value, going in not safe as much with the Nemesis form having to be proc. Look at how low Kalush is getting and having to just completely retreat over towards that engine room. And there's just this rotating flank by Fitz to get even more damage and pump it out. The wall blocks a little bit of the sight line, but again, Excelsior is continuing to try and separate with that Maywall, but Kalush says, my fists are ready, and I'm gonna just rush you.
really good patience from the Toronto Defiant, right? They lose speedily very early, but they don't just give up that positioning for free. Yes, they swap it over, but eventually they come back in and they're able to hold, which I think is really, really smart play from them, right? You don't retreat completely, you just bide your time for speedily to get back, and then you have some geometry to play around the map, which I think was really good rotations coming out from them. So now they're going to start ticking it up. Ultraviolet's going to have Ant Matrix, so now it's going to be a little bit more difficult for New York Excelsior to enter into this fight, but with the Dragon Strike from Fitz, they might be able to take this positioning away for free.
Yeah, especially because you can have those two really great channels to focus with the Amplification Matrix. Here is one of them down below, up towards the stairway. Has to draw back just ever so slightly, though, since there was a couple of opportunities for Ultraviolet to be pushed down, but New York Excelsior is just going to allow that to fall, wait till it's gone. Dragon Strike through the center to cause separation. Kaluj is now locked into the ceiling and does get the Nemesis form out in time. No follow-up damage despite them being pincered between that rooftop, and still gets a pickup onto Psycho. And this Immortality field has to be committed so quickly to keep Kellen alive, but there's just so much damage runneth over that they can't withstand it.
The target selection from Toronto Defiant is perfect here. If Psycho's going to play as aggressively as they have been on May, it's very easy for Kalush to hit that Nemesis form and just take him down if Psycho is going to greed with those ice blocks. So I think that they're really focusing down Psycho and making sure that if that aggressive play is coming through, they will be punished for it. Because you can see Speedily already has that Blizzard, and Psycho has died so early in a couple of these fights that they really haven't been able to keep up, and that's going to be a big cooldown coming in this next fight, especially with New York Excelsior having to go through these enclosed areas.
And you can see just blocking off that side position. Psycho gets a huge pickup onto Hydron. That's absolutely what you need to lean into this with the ultimate economy that Toronto Defiant has. Psycho now having their own Blizzard to commit into this if they want to, but they've really just been able to rotate back Toronto Defiant, but Speedily still gets one onto Fitz, and that's an opportunity to re-enter into this. Blizzard now been tossed, locked down onto Kalush, frozen up front. Can they get the elimination before the proc of the Annihilation? They do, so they will have a more challenging time, especially because the Amplification Matrix is here, but it's still Toronto Defiant overwhelming them once again, just completely taking control of this despite it swapping for a small percentage.
And then again, it's the supports, OG and Ultraviolet are able to hold that one back. Dragon Strike comes in, but no one's going to be able to touch, and Toronto Defiant are able to take this first map here of Antarctic Peninsula with some, I think, extremely clutch plays coming out from the support line. I mean, the way that Ultraviolet and OG are playing right now, completely out of this world. That last fight where they lose Kalush so early in the Blizzard, they bring it back just because Ultraviolet and OG there are sitting behind it, Ant Matrix, and pumping out a lot of damage to bring that one back to even keel. Really like what I'm seeing from the Toronto Defiant. It was a little bit spooky at the first map, the first sub map of this map, but it was an interesting moment to see this team kind of struggle a little bit at the start, Rich. That's not something I thought I'd see coming out.
And again, it kind of ties back to what the Desk was talking about, you know, needing to be very concerned if they find themselves in a difficult position facing off against New York, if Toronto Defiant isn't able to pull forward with this and be able to dominate. And again, despite as close as this first one was, Icebreaker, I will say, was much more convincing. Yeah. It was a lot more dominant. They really understood how to be able to cycle through their ultimate economy and also just their positional advantage to not overcommit a lot of these base abilities.
Yeah, and I think the thing about this team and the Toronto Defiant is that cycling of cooldowns that is really important for them, right? Their understanding of, like, the mirror. That's one of the things that I think this team really does great. But we have Hollywood next, and we're going to be taking it to a break, so don't go anywhere. Don't touch that browser. We'll be right back.
caution, cold like 0 degrees. I'm out the cage, gotta let out the beast. Revolutionary, gotta let out the streets. Locked in a cage, I'ma let out the. Wake up, get out the sheets. We came for war, man, forget my peace. You take the west, I'll take on the east. I'ma put them in the cage, never let out the. Yeah, I hear them chatting the noise. Can't stop for the talking. Hot like fire on the pan. If you wanna touch me, please use caution.
I know that you're all enjoying watching those videos because we do. I mean, I think everybody's
so
commented
good.
on it, but they're
They're
so
so
good. And also because you and I have had the chance to meet Hydron in person, that jawline, by the way, is just as intense in person as it is on that video. I'm going to be real honest. It will just like make you look twice and be like, yo, that's a jawline if I ever did see one.
I'm not sure Hydron ever thought that we'd compliment his jawline on broadcast. I'm not sure that's something that they
like
would
them
ever
cheekbones? Yeah, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But, you know, as we talk about that, we're going to talk about this next map, which is going to be Hollywood. And we haven't had these two be able to compete on this one, specifically Kenobi, but we do have expectations going into it compositionally to see what is going to be most advantageous for them to try and play against one another.
And this is interesting because on Antarctic Peninsula, we did see a little bit of Ash, and this is one of those maps where Ash really thrives in, right? Especially on that defensive end on first point, even through second, right? You can get a lot of value with it. Long-range hit scan and medium-range hit scan really thrive in maps like this. And going into it, I'm going to be interested to see what we'll see between both of these teams because of the fact that I think Fitz actually, to their everlasting credit, a lot of the times was kind of matching up with Hydron, right? It wasn't like a complete domination from Hydron. We know Fitz still has it in their back pocket to be an incredibly gifted hit scan, but it looks like actually we will be seeing Toronto Defiant opting in for more of that standard dive composition that we've been seeing lately with the Brigitte and with that Ana. So one of the things about this composition that we really have to be looking out for is where those hacks are going from Hydron. Hydron, I think, currently is actually first when it comes to enemies hacked and getting a lot of value of just like continuously being a nuisance, right? That's what Hydron is so good at. And then the follow-up from the rest of the members of Speedily and Kaluge always perfectly placed. And that's something that I think New York Excelsior has struggled at a little bit. So on this map in particular, I'd like to see a little bit more of those crisp, clean dives coming in from New York Excelsior.
And stepping away from control map, we really get to be able to immerse ourselves in if they've been able to elevate that. Since last week, what we saw, some of those struggles you mentioned, you can see already Hydron in the back, communicating the intel, going in for those early hacks to cause disruption before you've got New York pushing onto this initial point. Slow, methodical play right now, waiting for that entry. There is the initial dive coming in by Callan, who is overwhelmed for the moment, is going to have to pop the barrier and just jump out for the moment, but you still have them waiting to enter onto this. While you've got Hydron up the stairway, hasn't yet fully committed into a coordinated aggression from Toronto Defiant since it's been this slow movement here from New York. Nice pickup, though, from Psycho, as you do have a return from Speedily, so it's quite a bruising battle between two, and there's actually some point capturing capabilities here from New York.
Yeah, Toronto opted to counter dive as soon as they saw Kellen go a little bit aggressive, and then they just tried to go onto the backline, which worked. Respawns are a little bit closer, though, for New York Excelsior and Toronto Defiant. They don't have their healers, so their health bars are getting a little bit low. They should be back in time, but Speedily goes down to Psycho because the Brig is not there to give them those packs.
And it's just a matter of time. They continue to chip into Kaluge, having to jump back out, look to get topped up from the support, since, again, they do have quite a distance to return into this. Nice separation here in New York is keeping them at bay in this doorway so that they can guarantee this checkpoint just over 5 minutes to work with as we'll transition into the streets phase.
And that was much, much more clean from New York Excelsior. I think Psycho specifically deserves a lot of credit for being able to take that positioning away. As the Pulse Bomb comes in, doesn't manage to find anything, but a hefty time bank for New York Excelsior to move forward. And this matchup between Psycho and Speedily is going to be very interesting. We know Speedily is incredibly gifted in their own right, but Psycho, back in EU contenders, you could have argued was one of the best tracers that we had. So this is a matchup that I think is a lot closer than people might expect.
Yep, TBT will be a thrill. As you can see, Psycho, as you highlighted, getting an initial pick onto Hydron. Fitz able to just translocate out, get topped up by the health pack, and maneuver into this open space. Now, the high ground is something to really focus on and how Toronto's going to want to utilize it.
Yeah, and how also New York Excelsior is going to try and get up to it. You can see Fitz is on right now looking for the EMP. They find it onto OG. Ooh. Another sleep, though.
Nice recovery. Both supports are able to sustain, keeping through it, and there's really no way that they can take advantage of it from the low ground. And now you can see the
Ultraviolet getting dove on.
Yep, seeing if they can follow through onto it, dropping below with the nano onto Kaluge, causing enough disruption onto the opposing support line. There's a lot of just consistent damage coming through to get that inspired healing defensively to keep New York alive and pushing back into this Kaluge a little bit forced back for the moment until they can re-enter and having the nano. Oh, they're actually going to have the primal still held onto. Don't need to commit it here, and they're getting those necessary necessary picks to make this even more challenging for New York, and that Bionade has to force out the Primal Rage onto Kellen to recover, still getting bashed and controlled, as this is just going to be Toronto Defiant maintaining this position.
OG does end up going down, and Lep will be back into this fight relatively soon, so there is going to be that moment where they can go forward. But actually, Kellen gets antied, and the Nano from Creative does not manage to give them the help. Speedily is able to get the stick, and that's going to be a complete fight win. Again, Ultraviolet on this Ana just playing out of their skull pieces right now. That anti just completely negates the Nano from Creative, and if you're ever trading anti for Nano, that's a win you take 10 times out of 10 as the Toronto Defiant, and UV coming back up towards that Nano can throw it onto Hydron, throw it onto Kaluj, and really make it difficult for New York Excelsior to get that aggression going.
And a couple minutes already off the time bank for now. Great early initiation onto this. You do have the hack onto Speedily, denying a little bit of that mobility. The high ground has been capitalized on. New York taking advantage of it and working across the bridgeway. Nice lead for the moment onto Kaluj, but able to get back up and online as the damage comes in to force out the Primal Rage. Down below, resetting near this payload. Just again, continuously bludgeoning everyone close enough within range. Bionade lands onto 2. Left goes down. Kaluj capitalizes onto it. And this is now so much tension on the support line that New York can't withstand it.
And I mean, this time bank that New York had, which was about 5 minutes going into this one, it's just been completely dwindled to half right now. It feels like Toronto Defiant, especially with the fact that OG is being able to peel for Ultraviolet so long in these dives, it's giving Ultraviolet those chances to hit huge antis, hit huge sleeps like that, and they're just creating time for UV to be able to pop off like they're doing right now. But New York Excelsior come back into this one with an EMP. We'll see if there's going to be another sleep, because the Ultraviolet has already slipped one EMP from Fitz.
Nice hack to come out down below. Psycho extremely critical, so will draw back and get close to the supports as Fitz waits patiently. Wasn't able to get the outcome they would have liked with the initial one, but goes now for a second. There's the dive, Kellen close by, but you've got Ultraviolet running for their lives in the saloon underneath and survives. And as chaotic as it might have been when they're fleeing away from it, there is so much from Toronto Defiant to recover and sustain.
And that's one of the things I was talking about with New York Excelsior, where the EMP goes off and the follow-up is just not there, right? It was really good job from Ultraviolet and OG specifically to get them out of that fight, but if they had all 3 members, that's a dead Ultraviolet, so just not able to clean up on that dive. And New York Excelsior switch, put Fitz onto that Hanzo just to offer a little bit more of that recon against Hydron, and also that one-shot potential that they need to get a pick really quickly here.
Nice knockback as well, keeping Kellen from that high ground, denying any damage onto Ultraviolet. Arrows you could see whizzing by Ultraviolet, so dropping down just below, so there's a little more coverage. Kellen boosted, now playing forward, seeing what they can do with it. Hit by the bio, needs to be cautious, super low, and has to give another Primal Rage into this, since they're consistently being hit by Ultraviolet. OG's rally finally reaches its end, so you do lose a little bit of that protection, and with Kaluj down, they no longer have that front line disruption that Kaluj can consistently bring to the table, and now it's going to be New York able to gain some better distance.
That was a huge anti on Creative, was able to hit the OG while they were nanoed and get the anti, and then the follow-up is perfect there from New York Excelsior, but Kaluj will be back into this fight relatively soon, and the dive is good. Fitz is staying alive, though. Great hacks coming in from left.
Yeah, huge top-up, instantly healed to make sure that they are not going to lose that influx of damage or the Dragon Strike, which is looking to divide. Speedily almost gets shut down, able to dash just outside of the Twin Dragons. With underneath, Creative gets the elimination on it. I believe the Bionade may be even close to it, as you do have this follow through. Psycho keeping close with the pulse bomb, goes for the stick. Ooh. Able to get Ultraviolet, so they no longer have that healing, and OG is going to be bludgeoned to a very low health value, as Kaluj also can't survive. That gives more than enough space, so now it's 1:30 minutes for New York in the home stretch.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great defense from Toronto Defiant. I mean, whittling this time bank down as much as they did, but Speedily will end up going down to Psycho here. Psycho actually having a pretty decent time matching up with Speedily, especially since the fact that there's a Sombra on the other side, and it's very difficult for Tracers to pilot against both a Sombra and a Tracer in their own right, as New York Excelsior only have that minute left to work with Speedily. Coming up towards a Pulse Bomb, there's also that EMP from Hydron, so if you're Toronto Defiant, you want to probably just use one of these ults and then just continuously rotate your macro to be able to basically have 4 ults at the very end to be able to just stop New York Excelsior from capping.
And this is where the coordination and communication is key for New York Excelsior. We want to see them take the time to grow in moments like these with a short amount of time remaining. Still a decent distance, halfway to be accurate with Hydron. Looking for the EMP. Stealthful in, goes right onto 4. Quick work onto Kellen, who is going to be sent back to spawn. Couldn't get the primal, and New York's going to look to go again.
Chris playing absolutely perfect. I mean, that's absolutely perfect from them. If they can actually get the stragglers here from New York Excelsior, this is going to be very scary for them. They're trying to go for it. Creative is down. There's only 20 minutes left. Kaluj might have to give up their life for it, so potentially going a little bit too over-aggressive. They're not playing in the sightlines of the Ana, and now New York Excelsior can capitalize on a little bit on this over-aggression.
They need to do it now. They're going to have Kaluj back into this from spawn. You can see that there is this final bend. Now the home stretch with 6 seconds to go for New York Excelsior. Having the ultimates online, 5 in total here with Lep approaching it. To lean into this with a Dragon Strike, waiting, holstered for the moment until they can find the opportune time. Dividing to the left, going for the supports. Nano boost onto Fitz, pummeling consistently with arrows. OG down before the rally can come in. There's no extra armament. It's only Kaluj and Ultraviolet to be able to defensively use their ultimates and force back New York. Creative is down, so that's a lot on the weight of left to survive, but a pulse bomb says otherwise. Speedily comes in with a swiftness to deny that completion. Very important person ain't reaching the limits, and they will now take a swap of sides.
And, oh man, that's unfortunate for New York Excelsior. You saw Kellen, the map ended and they didn't use the Primal Rage. Probably wanted to have that one back, but I think that really good weathering of the storm from Toronto Defiant. And I think that's one of the things that, like, the synergy helps out so much with, right? It's like you're going up against a 5 ultimate bank and you're a little bit behind the 8 ball in terms of your own ultimates, but you're able to kind of weather that storm, be able to not really panic. I think that's one of the indications of a great team, right? Where you could go up against an ultimate kind of disadvantage and not just completely collapse, right? Because we know that 5 ultimates is very strong, but if you can kind of pilot that mid fight a little bit cleanly and with the synergy that you have with the rest of the team, that's really how you win those fights at a disadvantage.
And now, as we do see New York on the defense, Fitz going to come out onto this Ashe. As we had mentioned towards the start of this, you talked heavily about what we've typically seen and the value that it can bring into this, and I'm liking that we're going to see that defensively because it has such a great value in defensively holding against a team like Toronto.
The scary thing about this, though, is that if Toronto does end up coming out on this composition, Fitz has to play super careful, right? You only really have one option of escape, and that's the coach gun. There is a lot of incoming healing from Creative and from Lep, which is going to be good to keep Fitz alive. But with Toronto Defiant running this double flanker look and Kaluj and how crispy it is with their dives, and especially now that you have Ultraviolet on here as well with the sound barrier, or with the Kiriko, that's a lot of incoming damage to deal with Fitz, right? Fitz has to really, really play carefully because the lethality of this composition could be incredibly impactful. And you can actually see Speedily is going on to the Genji, so now it's even more that, like, Fitz is very scared in this position, right? Genji so lethal at executing those dives, and with Ultraviolet and Kaluj running along with them, it's gonna be very scary.
Oh, that quick swiftness up top. Fitz survives. Speedily goes down. What a huge defensive play from New York, able to completely deny accessibility onto that high ground and make quick work of Toronto.
I mean, that's all Fitz right there. I think that dynamite was impeccably placed. I don't think I've ever seen a better dynamite, honestly. Just the second the dive comes in, you're instantly all hit with that dynamite, and the incoming damage is too much for you to deal with, especially with just a Kiriko and a Lucio. You might not necessarily have the healing to deal with it, and you can see now Toronto Defiant actually getting off the Genji and going over to the Tracers. So again, trying to offer that ability to just instantly kill someone in that backline, but Fitz is actually no longer on that hit scan roll, so now they're back on the Sombra, and Toronto Defiant doesn't have one in their own right, so this is a little bit scary.
And you can see Hydron being very aware of it too, the fact when they come out of that after the hack, looking now to funnel damage into this doorway, getting point presence for now. No one yet contesting, so they've managed to give up at least one tick, but are waiting patiently for re-entry. And Hydra now taking the elevated position, looks for an angle. Disruptor shot blocks the doorway once again. Psycho can't work through it, and the healing isn't enough from both Creative and Lep to keep them going. And this is now going to be an initial checkpoint reached, as you do have really Kellen just buying extra time right now and waiting for hopefully the rest of the team to come back into support, since the Primal Rage is now active. Pulse Bomb just goes wide. Hydron eliminated. Bash comes in by Lep underneath with Speedily, focusing the supports heavily. Pulse Bomb onto Kaluj, gets low, but now has the Primal Rage again for sustainability and continues to juggle. Such beautiful play coming in by Toronto Defiant. Now going to fall back. Active, but is going to be shut down from the raging fists of Kaluj, just battering them once again.
That's a bit of a me MP right there. I mean, okay, Fitz is switching, but that was one. If they were staying on Sombra, I'd be just a little bit like, yeah, you probably could have kept that one for a second, but the fact that they're switching makes this okay, I think, in that own right. They tried to buy back in, didn't unfortunately work for them. Now bring in that Hanzo, though, so one of the things about the Hanzo here on the defensive end, especially with what Toronto Defiant is running, is now there is a little bit of a range advantage, right? Hydron has to play very carefully and make sure that if they are going to be charging up that rail, they have that one-shot potential, because Hanzo is just going to be able to win outright with the pressure they can output from these long angles.
And as we find ourselves in the same position once again, New York on the high ground, disruptor shot, making it more challenging to actually play on that ledge there to get those arrows in from Fitz, so it draws them back for the moment. Now maneuvering up to the high ground, Rally is active, but a Kitsune rush across the bridgeway of doom. They're attempting to say, you shall not pass, but what a sleep dart comes in. Hydron now looking to recover with what remains of the overclock. They have at least forced back New York to gain some distance.
I mean, that was an unreal sleep there, negating that overclock coming in from Hydron, but OG still holding on towards this sound barrier. They're trying to get up to the high ground and use it. Hydron getting taken incredibly low. You can see Psycho looking for it. The pulse is there. Ultraviolet gets taken down because there's no Suzu.
No, and because they used it earlier to keep Hydron alive, they can't withstand that follow-up by Psycho. This is now New York Excelsior in the driver's seat. They're going to be able to recover from this as everyone gets back in, and they're about halfway through this, so it's about even in where their spawn positioning is.
And now you can see Hydron is moving back over to the Sombra, right? They want to have a little bit more of that potential to execute these dives, because the Sojourn just not as capable of getting into those dives. So now when you have Hydron who can cheat the staging area aspect a little bit, you can get onto Fitz, potentially just insta-kill them in that back line, as Creative still looking towards this Nano, as Kellen is going to dive onto that high ground, try and take that space away. Fitz is kind of uncontested right now, which is a little bit of a scary situation. Toronto has nothing to deal with it, and Kalush is getting absolutely plastered by these arrows continuing to come in.
Yeah, spread amongst the drywall very easily, as there's 2 minutes and 20 seconds now. The nano boost active on the front line. Kellen looking to take down the support play, but another sleep from Ultraviolet, keeping the back line supported time and time again. Kellen forces out the Primal Rage because they just get so jumped on.
Yeah, but I mean, Kellen is doing a great job of zoning. Throughout all of this, Toronto Defiant haven't had their healers, but somehow Toronto Defiant is staying alive, which is fantastic for them. Psycho does get hacked, isn't taken down yet, but Kellen doing such a good job of zoning, and Kalush is forced back in. The Nano is used, and they don't have a jump yet, so they have to wait a little bit for that to get value.
Ooh, big turnaround, though, up top. Gets the jump in time to at least get that splash damage plus the melee and follow through from the right click to overwhelm Fitz. It's numbers advantage here. Left committed with that rally to guarantee that they can get some extra protection, but there's far too few to sustain through it. With 1 minute and 30 seconds, Toronto Defiant is now looking to be into the home stretch of this, but they just have to finalize these last few players.
Oh, big EMP from Hydron is managing to find 3. Psycho, just a lonely one here with Lep on that Brigitte. Pulse Bomb could be big to clutch this one out if they can find it, but Lep is so low. Are they going to get taken down by speed?
Oh, no, has to force the recall back to the point. They reach the checkpoint and now have 2 minutes and 42 seconds. Still a decent amount of time to work with, just above what New York had.
Yeah, and even if they, at this point, if they're going to be losing these next couple of fights, they do have at least one more ultimate rotation in their bank with 2.5 minutes left. But you can see Fitz going back over to the Ash in this enclosed area. I actually like this decision a lot, because the Dynamites can get a lot of value in these enclosed areas, and you have these sightlines to play around, and it's going to be difficult for Toronto to actually get onto Fitz in these scenarios, right? There isn't going to be that instant dive unless you're going to be sending Hydron into that back line and trying to get a pick that way.
Fitz playing a little more forward, but needs to be very cognizant of the dive to come in. The rally is active. OG gaining protection for the squad to move forward, capitalizing onto the low targets as the pulse bomb doesn't gain value here from Speedily. Just a small chip damage to the squad as they approach this box of victory. Near it, wanting to complete with the Bionade onto Kellen. It makes it really challenging, but since they've gotten rid of now both supports, this is disastrous here for Toronto Defiant, and it's a cleanup here for New York.
Psycho absolutely went bonkers that fight. I mean, the amount of value that Psycho is getting in these fights, again, against a Sombra and a Tracer, where you are in that 1v2 situation, Psycho is still getting a lot of value, which is a testament to how good they are on that Tracer. And Toronto Defiant, I mean, this is a little bit of a scary situation for them, right? They have a Nano, they have a Primal. EMP is going to be the big one here, but New York Excelsior have managed to find ultimates themselves in this elongated fight.
Fitz barely got out of that. There was a coordinated duo from Hydron and Kalush almost to bring them down, but able to cycle back and recover. 3 meters now to go. Hydron stealthed, EMP online, waiting to unleash onto New York for these final few meters. 60 seconds now, intensity rising. Psycho caught out, has to dash back quickly. EMP out, lands on to 2. Kellen Kellen can't get the Primal Rage active. Fitz gives the Bob for extra assistance. Psycho not able to get anything with the Pulse Bomb. Speedily at least denied to use theirs as well. Rally from left defensively, giving that again protection. 45 seconds, and you have Toronto Defiant having to draw back.
Toronto Defiant, I mean, they're still trying to fight this one. Kaluja's Primal, big anti onto the back line, but there isn't the follow-up there because Kaluja's putting the members away.
Yep, they're locking him into the corner, consistently swiveling to find maximum value, going back for the Mega Health Pack so that they're topped up for re-entry. 25 seconds. Every meter just continuing to reduce every combat they get into. Kellen, Primal Rage active, now going to cause just as much disruption, but is hacked for the moment. So low in the back, but both Creative and Lep are doing it. Psycho again, being the MVP that was in the previous fight, is able to do it again here, forcing back Toronto Defiant.
And there's no way back for Toronto. I mean, you have to get Hydron here to touch and get this overtime. They only have the rally to work with, though. Once they get back, can they get on? Overtime is proc. Speed needs to get back there.
Can they dash into it? Again, quick dash, all three gone. Dive in, nice knockback. Kaluch not onto the back line. The rally is active. OG needs to make sure that this team is powered up and ready to go. Kellen hit by the Bionade again from Ultraviolet. Hydron as well in return, though, from Creative too low. But what a quickness when it came to the recall for Psycho to survive. Hydron gets the pickup. It's massive to see that numbers advantage for Toronto Defiant. New York in these moments are not going to be able to outmatch the EMP that was lurking in the darkness that's able to give them this second map win on Hollywood.
I mean, Toronto Defiant win this one, but man, is New York Excelsior making this close. And this is something Jake talked about on the desk, where this needed to be convincing, right? And this is, so far, New York Excelsior is coming to play, right? They look really, really strong here in a couple of these moments. There's just these like small things as we're going to go through the replays, but like this looks like a completely different New York Excelsior team, right? They seem to have, after the rough week they had at the start in week one, this team is like starting to get their sea legs under them, it looks like. I mean, dude, how many times are we going to see Ultraviolet hit these insane sleeps? Right?
Yeah,
like this is
nutty.
just insanity. But going back to New York Excelsior, right? This team looks really, really much stronger than they did in that previous week, and I'm actually really excited to see what they can do going forward, because I think 2-0 right now is not indicative of how these matches have gone so far.
I feel it's like one of those moments, even though it was a week apart, it was like a halftime moment with Coach being just like, all right, this is where we have to pick ourselves back up, and they're doing it here to make it competitive. But we'll be able to see how this third map unfolds here on Havana just after this short break, so don't go anywhere.
Get down in the car, one time give it all. Bust it open hard, let me see you drop. Get down in the car, one time give it all. Bust it open hard, let me see you drop. Hustle, baby, we hustle, but the
Oh my.
Welcome back, everybody. If there was ever a intro like that I want to play at massive bass levels in my vehicle to rattle the framing, it's that one. I cannot get enough of it. And you can't see us on off cam, but oh my gosh, I was jiving Kenobi with that one
They
the
don't
whole
miss.
time.
They don't. New York Excelsior do not miss with their videos. I mean, those every single hype video I feel like I've seen from them is just absolutely impeccable, and that one's no different. But we are going to be transitioning over to our third map here of Havana. Toronto in the lead 2-0, and this is a map that I'm a bit worried about for the New York Excelsior.
Yeah.
Right? We do have a sub. Shockwave will eventually be coming in here for Fitz, but I think when we look at this map in particular, this was a map where back in Pro-Am, when Toronto Defiant played Boston Uprising, they annihilated the Boston Uprising, and a lot of it had to do with Hydron. Like, this is a map where I'm thinking, like, Hydron gets to play Widow. Where do you come back? Like, where is that avenue for New York Excelsior to win this map? Because this is just a perfect place for New York Excelsior to play, right? Or not New York Excelsior, Toronto Defiant, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get Kaluj on Sigma, his best hero. Hydron Widow, his best hero. Speedily can play pretty much anything like the Tracer or the Hanzo, right? And then the supports get to, you know, have those long-range battles that they like so much. This is just a perfect map for Toronto Defiant. I think it's probably their best one out of the pool that we have right now. So there's a lot for New York Excelsior in their own right to go up against a matchup like this.
And there were already factors that New York was having to really work on. You know, the synergy, able to clean up a lot of the things that were a little bit off in timing. But yes, now that you look at that 1-to-1 skill ratio where Hydron is able to completely take over a lot of these positions, just the initial defense, the surprise factor, the dominance in angles, even a couple of those that we saw like on other maps, like with Junkertown, where they're getting two hot, quick flicks, just close range shots. It's absolutely insane to see what Hydron can do and just control the map as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, back in Pro-Am, I think that when they were on the defensive end, Hydron like put Birdring in a coffin.
Yeah.
Like, they did not. I don't think Birdring had a kill because Hydron was just so oppressive on that pick, and I think that we'll probably see something similar right on this matchup. It actually looks like though on the defensive or on the offensive end, or defensive end rather, they are going to not be opting in for that Widowmaker. They're staying on the Symmetra and the Mei, and this is something that is interesting with Havana, right? Because you have this very close hold opportunity, and you can see that they're being very sneaky about it. Yeah, they're being super sneaky about it. And New York Excelsior, are they going to know? Because one of the things about this map that I love is when people do take these close holds, because you can take a lot of time off the clock and essentially guarantee yourself that second point or that second fight right before it turns that corner, because it's so long to move forward. As we can see, Toronto Defiant going to be moving forward, throwing those turrets on the edge of that building there and making it hard for New York Excelsior to exit.
And the dynamic of this too is because New York might actually be anticipating what we have seen specifically from Hydron. So taking this different type of flavor to their approach with composition really can put New York Excelsior off, and you're going to already see that this is a quick job done on the front line, able to just shut down New York Excelsior.
That was a fantastic wall from Speedily to kind of section Kellen off from the AoE of the healers, and Kellen just initially evaporated after the Immortality Field. Great play from the Toronto Defiant to start this off on their close hold here, and they're just going to keep it going. I mean, already by the time we get to this next fight, a minute will be taken off the clock, and they're sitting pretty.
Oh, but that's not what you want to see. Speedily goes down, dropping from the high ground position as Shockwave gets a clean shot. Immortality Field should give just enough sustainability to put that extra tension onto Toronto Defiant, but Ultraviolet coming in with the damage, taking down their counterpart. This is just a bloodbath amongst this initial position. And again, the spawn advantage is here for New York, so they will be able to have the numbers advantage.
The second taken down low and goes down, and Kellen has to go back and just heal because they don't have the healers with them right there. And it's getting taken down extremely low here. Finally, Creative is back to pump in those heals, but now Toronto Defiant are back in it.
Amp Matrix making sure that there is a window of opportunity to influx that damage. Annihilation committed by Kaluj. Everyone is going to have to draw back into their spawn, but as they attempt to do so, they're laid 10 feet under.
And I think this is one of the best things about Toronto Defiant. We talked about before this map where we're like, hey, they're going to play the Sigma and things like that. But one of the things about Toronto Defiant that's so incredible for them is that their ability to play various different things. And on a map like this where you would expect them to play one comp, they're piloting this composition, this rush style so effectively.
Photon barrier active. Really cognizant in how New York Excelsior is going to have to maneuver around this to get the advantage. They do have the opposing position to collapse into this shatter onto 2. Speedily to the other side of the photon barrier, but drops. Dragon Strike gets OG before the sound barrier can be committed, and they finally break this stronghold that is Toronto Defiant and can start gaining distance.
Yeah, I mean, that was really close because it was a perfectly placed immortality field from Ultraviolet to be able to keep OG alive through the initial shatter, but the Dragon Strike was layered perfectly on top of that. And I also do want to credit OG for holding on to that sound barrier because they knew, or he knew probably he was going to get Ajaxed, right? And you don't want that. You want to be able to come back into this next fight and match with the sound barrier that New York Excelsior is going to have in their own right.
And they'll be anchoring up top for the moment until they can collapse downwards. TP comes in by Hydron. Again, this coordination that we've seen a lot onto the control map. We're going to see the same thing here. Amplification Matrix now continuing the influx of healing. Ultraviolet gets covered by the sound barrier from OG that you mentioned, kept from the previous fight. But this is still New York able to take advantage of this, despite what was committed into it and the clever reposition.
And now that it's a little bit more open, Shockwave gets that kind of opportunity to take these angles and really impact the game on that Hanzo, because one of the things Toronto Defiant's composition doesn't have is that ability to match with that one-shot potential, right? Speedily can sometimes hit some icicles, but it's not enough, and now Shockwave has that Dragon Strike to zone Toronto off his card.
Kellen now has the Earth Shatter. It got just enough with the Fire Strike so that they can guarantee usage. They're clustered to the corner, Wall attempting to divide and knock them back, but can't quite do so. The placement is off. Left gets Kaluge. Blizzard is attempting to slow the momentum backward, and that will be New York able to clean this up, gain the checkpoint, and now add a new lease on life with 3 minutes inside the brewery.
And you're definitely happy with that one because they were getting held pretty significantly at the start, but they're finally able to break that defense. And now I think that this Reinhardt composition is working out so well for them, right, in this scenario, because Toronto Defiant, they don't necessarily have the staying power, especially with this Ramatra, as Psycho is able to get Hydron. So now there's a lot of damage gone, and this wall is going to do so much in making sure that Toronto Defiant have to retreat here. Another counter wall from Speedily gets them out, but without Hydron in this fight, they don't have the damage to be able to contest this, and this is just free cart progression for New York Excelsior.
Yeah, and they're getting it to that position of where the catwalk kind of meets that second high ground doorway.
Oh my god!
No, Shockwave comes in.
Where did that even come from?
I don't know either. We're probably going to get a replay of it, but my goodness, did that thread a needle.
And I think this is one of the things that like the Hanzo does so well is, again, that lovely. Shockwave's right. Shockwave, tell him that's exactly what Hanzo can do in these scenarios. But we see Toronto Defiant coming back into recontest. There is going to be that TP onto the high ground. They're trying to take down one of the members in the back. Shockwave getting extremely low and finally gets obliterated.
Punishment for chatting in the open space. Just letting him know that that lovely is not so lovely from OG, with this rotation now coming in from Toronto Defiant to collapse onto the few from New York. Since they are at the numbers disadvantage, Immortality Field no longer able to keep them alive. And Nemesis form is just going to continue with the Fists of Fury meleeing forward, and now final stability from Toronto.
And I think now Toronto Defiant are like, okay, we've figured out what the raid boss is for New York Excelsior, and it's Shockwave. If we can just TP onto Shockwave and just instantly kill them, it's going to be very difficult for Creative and Lep to keep Shockwave alive in this scenario, as we're going to be seeing the replay of how this happened. I mean, what even... Okay.
Oh, no! It literally just grazed.
That is a grade A mahogany log right there. That is absolutely perfect.
I mean, that's been sanded, varnished, and completely put on display. I would let that arrow be on any artwork wall. As you do see us get back into this now, 60 seconds to go. New York having one last opportunity here to push into this. They have the Earth Shatter at least with a sound barrier. Shockwave gets one open out the gate again, but this time onto OG. And now pushing into this, the Blizzard has been committed. Speedily really wasn't able to lock down as many as they would have liked positionally with that. Already has to force out the defensive shatter. Now goes instantly. Big wall from Speedily after coming out of the cryo freeze. Annihilation from Kaluge is going to influx damage, and the fact that there's so many that's close by, it'll keep that duration lasting for the moment, but the shield will mitigate the tail end of it. Hydron waiting to put some logs themselves into the mix here. Are they made of mahogany? Only time will tell. Drawing back as the Blizzard committed, forcing back Toronto, looking for a wall to divide Kaluge, but still sidestepping it for the moment to stick close to the supports. Both OG and Ultraviolet continuing to just fuel Kaluge to hold this position, as Kellen still gets very low on the front with a Dragon Strike coming in from the side.
Oh, the wall comes in. Dragon Strike return back in. Ultraviolet so close towards that Ant Matrix. That might be the moment that Toronto Defiant can win this fight aggressively.
The flank from Hydron doesn't land. It was so necessary to get those picks, but again, falls just short. Pick Shockwave! Matter of time. They hold on long enough. Psycho low, but getting topped up. They've gotten the advantage. Callan is down. Hydron gets the final pickup. Multi-shots go wide, but that one hits true. And on this high ground, continuing to be uncontested. 25 HP. Creative finds him. The overtime is still active. They just need to reduce Collusion OG, but I'm not sure if there's going to be enough from New York to be able to capitalize on this because of how long Collusion is lasting.
Yeah, respawns are also closer, and UV is back now with that Ant Matrix. That's going to be so much healing and damage to deal with, and they just get off of that cart. That was so scary for the Toronto Defiant there. I mean, I thought the second Shockwave got that pick onto Ultraviolet, the fight was over, but again, the synergy and the ability in the mid-fight to just not panic and keep themselves alive, right? The target selection, absolutely perfect from the Toronto Defiant to just know that if we stay alive, we have an advantage because Collusion alive, Kellen's not here, we will eventually out-sustain them. So really, really well played from Toronto Defiant to hold at the very end there. But New York Excelsior, I mean, Shockwave's looking really good, especially on this Hanzo. There's a lot of times where they're getting these picks and just unfortunately they aren't able to capitalize because, again, the ability of Toronto Defiant to be able to synergize their way through these mid-fights is really, really impeccable.
Just bring me in, coach. Shockwave is here to send ripples amongst the floor. And now on the defensive side, looking to see if they can do the same, as we will now most likely have this competition between Shockwave and Hydron that's going to continue to elevate. And still a decent distance to their credit. And again, it was so close that Kellen is going to be able to get there to potentially keep that fight going, but still a very hefty distance gained as we do take the swap of sides with Toronto on the attack.
It's also so interesting that we're seeing like this change to this map in particular, right? This is a map where usually you see those long-range hit scans really get a lot of value. Widowmaker especially, you have Sigma, but it feels like the Brawl is kind of the flavor of the map with these two teams at the current moment, as Toronto Defiant going to be opting in for the Symmetra, so they do have that ability to kind of maneuver around with the TP if they would like to and get into that backline, so they don't really have to take an engagement here and just poke. They can use that TP aggressively, but Shockwave again is able to take down speedily, and this is the value of that Hanzo, especially when you're someone as good as Shockwave is. You have that long-range one-shot potential.
You can feel the ripples, the first of many that you're going to need to see from New York to dwindle the time bank coming out the gate here. Toronto Defiant not really able to get their footing just yet or utilize Hydron's teleporter as they actively place it. Don't utilize it, more so to draw attention away to press forward. The wall comes in, denying some of the positional shots from Shockwave, going up top, can't quite land it. Still getting some decent pressure though, because nobody can really focus down Shockwave since they're maintaining the front line. This illusion around the payload, managing to get another. Hydron is down, and a pick after such a minute of time committed and a shatter to put them on their backs.
I'm loving the way New York Excelsior are playing these fights. You know, they're just basically saying, hey, Shockwave, stay in the back line, be able to create that space for us and get those picks. And I think that it's working so well. They're putting a lot of effort into giving Shockwave that opportunity and that space to pop off with the way that they're positioning. And now you can see Hydron opting back over to the Hanzo themselves to try and match up with that long range.
And now Amplification Matrix active. Nice wall initially by Psycho to block some of the angles for that extra boosted damage. Going back to neutral, waiting for them to drop and going to hold on for a new entry point.
And because Speed has been focused so much, they're nowhere close towards that Blizzard, right? So now Psycho has their own, and this is a very enclosed area where Blizzard can get a ton of value.
And now you've got Callan charging to the opposing side to still be that front line necessary. Blizzard to lock them down. You've got Kaluja already so low. It's 2 minutes off the clock, and New York is absolutely just completely enrooted into the ground.
I mean, they're playing this so well. It's weird that we're seeing in a rush mirror that New York Excelsior is really kind of putting the tempo forward and pressing aggressively. That's something we know Toronto Defiant to do, as they're going to try now to go aggressively.
Yep, just rushing in. Kaluja instantly popping the Nemesis form, but going down with their front line. And again, that's a timing issue. I'm almost wondering if they wanted to lean in to get the Annihilation to utilize that for a second refresh on the Nemesis.
I think the wall from Psycho actually blocked the sound barrier from OG being able to hit Kaluja there, so Kaluja did not get any value from that. And now look at New York Excelsior. They have a sound barrier advantage.
Minute and 40, the wall is there to block some of it, but still getting a knockdown. Blizzard active, Annihilation. You can see that Toronto Defiant is like having to ebb and flow back and forth. There is finally a numbers advantage after so much time worn off the clock. New York Excelsior now could be half happy with this one and get a full reset back at a second junction.
Completely happy for them. I mean, taking as much time as they did off the clock, and by the time, Rich, we get to this next fight, it could be potentially the last fight that we get, right? The big thing about this is that Toronto Defiant do have that ability to set up right with these angles. You can put Hydron on high ground. You also have Ultraviolet who's coming up towards that Ant Matrix, so now Hydron is scouted out though, so they know where he is, and that's really good recon dart coming in from Shockwave to be able to push them off that high ground.
Wall already committed. The Vortex instantly drops down Kellen the second their toes move off the edge. And you can see that left committing that amplification matrix. You've got Hydron tossing the dragons in since they're clustered towards that pillar position. Ultraviolet gets the execution onto Creative. So now they've lost so much healing. That is a lot for left to handle, and there's no way that they can sustain.
Yeah, they're just trying to stall as much as they can because they will get one last chance. Shockwave is trying their best to return some kills, but I think this is just stall tactics. Shockwave gets another one, 2 down. I mean, is that going to be enough for New York Excelsior to get back into this one? The cart only has 2 on it, so now New York Excelsior definitely have a chance to get back, especially with the Lucio speed, and Shockwave has a Dragon Strike, so they can zone off this cart and split the entirety of Toronto Defiant and make it so difficult for them to maneuver this fight, especially with the Blizzard on top of it.
Yeah, 2 ultimates online soon to have Kellens for the third. If Lep can also get to the sound barrier fast enough, that will be it. Oh, Shockwave! One onto Speedily. Speedily will not have the Blizzard for this last fight. That is disastrous. You solely have to rely now onto OG and Kaluge to contribute into this. Blizzard from Psycho tossed into the mix. Kaluge needs to go down and is picked up. Psycho gets the icicle between the eyes. That's the cleanup here for New York Excelsior. They are not done yet, and they want to bring it to another map.
I mean, absolutely unreal performance from Shockwave. I mean, the amount of times that Shockwave was able to get picks that were so important at the start of those fights, taking down Maze, taking down supports. Sometimes it didn't end up in a fight win, but just the amount of times they were able to really get value off of this Hanzo. I mean, finishing 22-14 final blows, highest in the lobby. I mean, this was just an absolute masterclass from this Hanzo player in Shockwave, and I wonder if we see Shockwave continue to play, because this was just a great performance from them.
And the big question too is, this was a map that we all anticipated Toronto Defiant being so strong on, and now you've seen New York be able to break down the foundation of a map that rightfully should have been theirs. But with that being said, for now we're going to be heading into our 4th map just after this short break, so don't go anywhere, because we're going to be getting into this one, and I think it could just go the distance.
open heart. Let me see you drive. Get down in the car. One time, give it all. Bust it open heart. Let me see you drive. Hustle, baby, we hustle. What the, oh my
Greetings, friends. We had to hit you again with the hype video. It was the kryptonite, apparently, for Toronto in the previous one, so we did it again to see if we can reach our map 5, Kenobi. That's what was said from the desk back when we were in Pro-Am, that we've got some kind of mojo or a ritual to get us there, and maybe we'll be seeing it again here.
Yeah, we're here for the entertainment of Chad, getting you all the map 5 banger series that you want. But as we go into this, it's going to be very interesting to see kind of what we're going to be seeing from the Toronto Defiant, because we did see a lot of more of that rush style on Havana, which is something I expected. But now as we go over to Esperanza, which is going to be our next map, I think we're probably going to be trending back towards more of that Winston, Sombra, Tracer, Dive look that we've seen previously in those first 2 maps.
Yeah, and with what we had also previously seen so far, it is going to be the Junker Queen that was so dominant. Kaluj able to pilot it with such great success and overwhelming just with that dominance that could be pressed forward with their proficiency to utilize that tank.
And I think that's going to be an interesting thing as well to look at. Like, do we see a change up from the Toronto Defiant in terms of like not wanting to handshake the mirror, right? Because Toronto Defiant, I think one of the best things about them is their versatility, right? Kaluj last year kind of, I think, answered a lot of questions about his ability to play a lot of the different tanks and looks very, very competent on a lot of them, which is a big deal. But for New York Excelsior, we've seen them, besides kind of the rush styles we've seen a little bit today, which were very map dependent, they've almost only trended towards just that standard Sombra, Tracer, Dive composition. So that's going to be interesting to me to see if we do see kind of this rock, paper, scissor matchup of, is there going to be any swaps from the Toronto Defiant, or are they just perfectly fine handshaking that composition?
We'll see if the handshake will hold true, but the desk right now has got to be a little shaken seeing that there is a map down for Toronto Defiant, when I don't think any of us really expected it to go in this direction on a map 4 where New York is able to just get a newfound empowerment going into this map.
I mean, you heard it from Jake on the desk. Jake was like, this needs to be like convincing. This is an 0-2 team who we expected to have like very high expectations. Being 0-2 at this moment, kind of shocking to a lot of people. But New York Excelsior taking a map is a little bit of a scary situation for this Toronto team, especially when it was on a rush style of composition, which we would think that Toronto would be very adept at. But New York Excelsior came to play on that Havana and really, really strutted their stuff. But on Esperanza, it's probably going to be a different beast with the compositions we see.
Well, and the big thing, too, is when we talk a lot about, especially after getting through that initial archway where that upper catwalk is, that's such a dominant position to hold. And with the coordination that we've seen from Defiant, it's going to be something that they can really play heavily to their strengths, and understanding that ebb and flow from the high to low ground, keeping it contested and always going back if absolutely necessary to that neutral and outmatch New York. Because that's one of the big things we really led with at the start, is that there needs to be this refinement, the coordination for New York, how they can elevate. And they've done a spectacular job doing so. Shockwave in the last one gave enough influx of morale that I think with this swap back onto Fitz and the coordinated composition that they're going to bring to the table, that they really can take this into a 5 map.
I said it before in like the previous map, it feels like this is New York Excelsior starting to get their sea legs under them, right? That's one of the things that after week 1, it was a little bit, you know, of a scary situation for them in terms of like, how are they going to look going forward? But I think, so we mentioned it on the desk, like the dynamic of this team was interesting to start things off, because it was just kind of like a mishmash of players that were coming together. And then now they look like they've had a couple of moments and a couple of scrims to be able to get that coordination under their belt and look a lot more secure as a team as we go into this first matchup. And an interesting look here for the New York Excelsior. It feels like we're seeing more of that rush versus rush style again. And Fitz is going to be on this Ash at this moment, so this is going to be a bit of a scary situation for Toronto Defiant, because they have to be very careful playing a clump like this against these Dynamites. These Dynamites could completely wreck Toronto Defiant from the inside out, especially because they're going with Lucio Kiriko, and you don't necessarily have the amount of healing to deal with that constant pressure that's going to be coming in from Fitz.
And you can see rounding the corner, still keeping both supports in the back, as with Fitz keeping a watchful eye and getting some decent damage out already with the Dynamite. Just continuing to accrue towards that initial Bob ultimate. And now with it going to be Kalush still really utilizing that nook of the doorway to recover so that they can push this bot forward enough, but they aren't able to go out willingly into the space.
Yeah, I mean, they're just trying to poke and prod here. New York Excelsior is really positioned well in this scenario. Suzu has been pulled out by Ultraviolet, so this could be a moment where Psycho can get a little bit more aggressive and try and force out some really big cooldowns. Shout is going out from Kalush. They're trying to get onto this high ground.
They've used that now very aggressively forward. Patience is a virtue, though, from New York. They just have to find the opportunity. Bio-nade lands, so Kalush has to be hesitant upon re-entry. The dagger does bring Kellen close enough, but the Nemesis form gets them through it. Psycho finds the pick, and again, Patience just waiting and looming in the back to find the shutdown like that is necessary. Attempting to find more, but there's the Kitsune rush that's been generated all throughout this initial fight, and that's going to be Hydron getting a beautiful rail onto Fitz, denying that influx of damage from the high ground.
And I think Creative wanted there to nano Kellen, but unfortunately Psycho ate it and Kellen got obliterated. If the nano is there onto Kellen, Kellen lives, and that would really turn the fight completely for New York Excelsior, who were playing that fight so well at the start. The positioning was great. They were just poking and prodding, using the composition to the best of their ability, but Toronto Defiant find an opening with that shout, commanding shout, going aggressive, and now they have control of this high ground, which is great for them, especially when you're just trying to poke and prod with Hydron.
Psycho here in the back, they're not ready for it. The Suzu to reposition, they attempted to get the Vortex so Psycho could find value, but a little bit mistimed again here. As we've mentioned before, needs to be cleaner. Bob gonna be thrown into the mix, denying contention for now before the checkpoint, seeing if they can elude around Toronto Defiant, who are able to flee for the moment, but unfortunately Kellen shuts down Kalush, and Toronto Defiant just have to AWOL it out of here.
And I like that they're actually doing this and just getting out of dodge, not taking the fight, because they know the bot has been taken away, so they have to retreat and try and hold themselves here on this high ground, but it looks like New York Excelsior are just going to go and take it away. Super smart from them, not wanting Toronto Defiant to get a free positioning advantage here in this scenario, and Toronto Defiant can come back into this. They have a Rampage, which is going to be big, but on the other side, Leps has that Soundbarrier available to blanket the damage that could be coming through.
And there's presence already up top. Kellen gonna hold the line for now, rushing forward. There's the Annihilation Sound Barrier from OG, giving protection to deny Kellen from just continuing to dwindle the health values. Hydron has to completely flee. The Dynamite tossed into the mix, a small area, but Hydron able to counteract it and take them down. 5 versus 4, Creative, critically low, as speedily capitalizes on that low health. Alone Grandma in the back, and New York unfortunately cannot withstand this combat.
And this is the Toronto Defiant that I love, right? This kind of aggressive, high-tempo style where they're the ones really setting the tempo, right? They're going first. They're using Sound Barrier aggressively there from OGE, and New York Excelsior, throughout that whole fight, essentially just played it on the back foot with a lot of their ultimates. So that's really Toronto Defiant setting that tempo and setting that pace that's so strong for them here, as I think they will be able to get this checkpoint. It's very, very close. New York Excelsior might try and recontest, but it looks like the butt scratch will eventually be enabled.
Yep, getting that checkpoint is so vital. Closer spawns, able to have that guaranteed so that when you're continuing to push and there's a retaliation by New York, that they have to obtain it themselves. Creative now with the Nano leading into this is Fitz going with the Disruptor shot, zoning them away from the barricade. Nano as well. The pulse bomb does go on to Hydron, getting the elimination. Numbers advantage. Despite the Kitsune rush being just across this center, you still have New York leaning into it because they've got a shoulder to just completely overwhelm Defiant.
Really love that aggression from Fitz. They're getting that, overclock and just going aggressive, or not overclock, just seeing if they could get into that back line, find some picks. Toronto Defiant used that Kitsune rush just to try and buy back into it, but they have gotten the checkpoint. So for them, it's kind of definitely worth it in that scenario, especially because now Kalush is going to be coming up towards that Rampage. OG has this Sound Barrier a little bit before Lep, and this is where I'd like to see Toronto again be aggressive, tempo that Sound Barrier forward, and make New York Excelsior work for this positioning.
And the commanding shout already to lean into it, but nice Ravenous Vortex to slow that movement, deny them this aggression that is required. Disruptor shot gets Kellen. There's so much focus onto this, and New York has no ability to stick around.
I love it. They're just not standing on ceremony for Toronto Defiant. Again, they're just being aggressive, setting that tempo, using the Sound Barrier aggressively, because they know they can just come back into this fight, even if they're just getting a singular kill, right? They know that's enough to just force it forward, and now they take back control of the bot, and they also get control of this high ground here to be able to poke down onto the New York Excelsior as they try and recontest here.
You can see that Psycho's got the intel, just completely weaving around Toronto Defiant. What a shot. Big follow-up onto OG, and that was really swift. The Rampage comes in, lands onto 4, but Lep gets the coverage necessary. Fitz critically low, Ultraviolet gets the shutdown, and it's just now a great follow-through. Toronto not yet out of this, but as I say that, there is a quick two-piece that comes in for New York to again take this with 4 minutes and 20 seconds to go.
That was actually such a sick shield from Kellen there, putting it up directly, framed perfectly to block the incoming pulse bomb coming in from Speedily. I don't think I've ever seen a block like that happen before, but Kellen really strutting their stuff here with the mechanics on this Ramatra, and now you can see Toronto Defiant switching things up a little bit, going more towards that Winston, trying to have that dive potential to potentially get onto Fitz in that backline or those supports and really make their lives difficult.
And again, this is still decently close, a distance that is acquirable by New York. As long as they can get to this checkpoint, still with a decent amount of time left, they have an opportunity to keep this going. Hydron on the flank though, overclock, ready, waiting to pull the trigger, and pulling the trigger is now unleashing the damage. The disruptor shot also going to slow the momentum, can't quite land it onto Fitz, who's also boosted, but then after multiple shots, hits the target. It is only a matter of time with Hydron as we continue to see them keep this backline positioning, harassing consistently, but there's still value being brought by New York, and the collapse onto Hydron with the Ravenous Vortex to deny their escape.
And because this fight has been elongated so much, New York Excelsior is going to be able to cap here. There's no way Toronto Defiant can get back into, or New York Excelsior can, or Toronto Defiant can get back into this one in this scenario. And Toronto Defiant swapping their composition a little bit. EMP is something that Hydron's going to be looking for. With 3 minutes left, you should be able to find it, especially against a Ramatra composition. So this is kind of a desperate swap to try and again make Fitz's life a little bit more miserable.
And with this checkpoint reached, it is only a few meters distance to outmatch Toronto Defiant. Psycho with the pulse bomb very low, forces the recall, big pickup early, both Lucio's down. Doesn't quite have the value necessary, but the Kitsune Rush should outmatch New York. And again, taking advantage of this, forcing them, but again, time and patience here for New York to draw back for a recovery and come back into this again with 2:30.
Kalush needs to get back to the rest of the team because the healers or their Psycho is getting taken down extremely low. Ooh. Actually, Nemesis form is used. Ultraviolet TP'd in, and now they're dead. So that means that there's no healing available for Toronto Defiant. They just have the Lucio, and they have to get in a dodge, and that means, Rich, they're going to lose control of this bot, and they're going to lose the lead.
You can see Hydron needs to get there to contest it, to deny that checkpoint game, but they make swift work of it. They've now taken the advantage. And with only 2 minutes, Toronto Defiant might have just dropped the ball.
This is really, really scary for the Toronto Defiant here. Yes, they're coming up on a lot of key ultimates, but now New York Excelsior are so in the lead, and you can see they're just playing with that advantage. They have control of this high ground, and that's going to make it so difficult for Toronto Defiant to try and get there and force them off of it. The positioning from New York Excelsior is such an advantage right now.
They have to play this just perfectly to make sure that they can get into this map 5. Up top, Fitz goes in aggressively onto Kalush, forcing out the Primal Rage. And you can see a great disengage from Fitz to keep the distance, and there's no one that can really punish them for it. And you can even see Kalush having to sit down below behind the wall because there's just too much focus fire. Bionade lands. It's still going to be... Whoa! Pulse bomb from Psycho gets 2! Everything is stacking up heavily in favor of New York, and they're looking for a map of control.
That sound barrier was so clutch from Lip as well. Just Fitz was like 10 health, and the sound barrier layers it in. Psycho comes in with a beautiful pulse bomb, and New York Excelsior are able to weather the storm. Toronto Defiant not looking with too much in their bank. They have this EMP and the Nano. They're going to need to have these fights be miracle fights from here on out.
And you can see Hydron stealthing in, looking for a moment, lands onto Kellen. That's the win condition right now to deny them, removing them from the equation. But again, this is where you can see New York just look to flee. Toronto has to capitalize on it because now they've got 50 seconds to take the lead.
They have close spawns as well, so they are going to be able to control this high ground on the other side of the map, and that was a really well-played positioning coming in from Toronto Defiant, just using that singular EMP. The Nano is going to be very key here from Ultraviolet. Can they find that engagement with Kalush, take down one of the supports in that backline?
Tensions continue to rise. 30 seconds now remain. The advantage for New York. The bots still patiently standing still, teeter-tottering back and forth as Kalush holds towards the neutral. Hydron in the back looking for a critical hack to get the dive value. Nano onto Kalush, diving in, generating as quickly as they can towards this Primal Rage to get it online. They've not been able to sever or dislodge New York from the bridgeway. Maintaining their position dominantly. Nemesis is now going to be active alongside the Annihilation, but still Kalush gets creative. The Bionade is landing. Kellen low, but getting topped up with the armament. Kalush needs to get out. They can't afford to lose them. Bobbing and weaving, but Fitz finds the rail. It's New York able to take advantage of this. There's no way that they have the numbers to do this. New York is cleaning it up. The overtime is going to dwindle. That's going to be New York counteracting Toronto Defiant on a map 4 and saying, we're not done yet, Toronto.
The reverse sweep is alive, and I guess our rituals and our mojo have worked, Rich. Toronto Defiant lose 2 off the trot, and we're going to a map 5 here. I think completely unexpected from almost anyone who looked into this one. This was just one where I think that no one was really expecting this to end up the way it was. I think New York Excelsior deserve so much credit, right? Down 2-0, coming back in on Havana, a map that we thought Toronto was going to be so good at. They win that one. Then we go over to here, Esperanza, and they look super clean on this rush style of composition. Fitz looks amazing. Psycho looks amazing too. I mean, when you're going up against someone like Speedily, right? You think that it's going to be Speedily who has an advantage with how mechanically gifted they are, but man, Psycho is coming to play on this series, and we're going to a map 5 where anything can happen, and it's going to be a situation where if I'm Toronto, I'm starting to sweat a little bit, because going down 0-3, the desk talked about it, that's going to be a very big detriment.
Bibbity bobbity Overwatch map 5-ity. That's what I'm going to say right now as we head to a short break before going into Oasis. Don't go anywhere, friends, because I think we're all excited to see who's going to be able to take this. We have returned, and the ritual stands true, Kenobi. We find ourselves on a map 5. We've gone the distance. We want more action for all of you at home. For those on the desk, we're just bringing all the excitement today, as it's now New York able to potentially find themselves a reverse sweep.
We're just helping the people get their drops. You know, that's the big thing right now. That's what we're here for. We're helping out Chow. But Oasis is going to be one that, again, is going to be interesting for me because it's weird that we've seen kind of more brawly style of compositions from both these teams when the meta seems to have been trending more towards the Sombra, the Tracer. Oasis seems like a map where like that should come back into fruition, but I thought that about Esperanza. I thought Habana was going to be different, but it's been a lot more of that brawl style. And for New York Excelsior, it's been working out for them. The last two maps that we've had, it's them playing much more of that Ramatra kind of style that is really, really beneficial to them. Kellen, I think, is looking really good on that pick. Psycho is performing really well. And I think that going into this one, if you're Toronto, you've got to be sweating, right? Going down 0-3 is a big deal. Yes, last week you played against two really good opponents, but this week it was like New York Excelsior, one that you could potentially bring back your momentum, and they've taken two maps off of you, and you're on the back end of a reverse sweep. This is a very, very scary situation for the Toronto Defiant if they don't manage to come out with a victory in this one.
It's a flashback moment to day one against Shock, as they are now in a map 5 in a position. The tensions rise once again. It was already increasing for every map stolen away, and they're really not wanting to have it be a third, to leave them at a 0-3 scoring.
Toronto Defiant looks like they're going to be running with this Junker Queen composition. It is really good into the Winston, right? Because the thing that Junker Queen does so well is just forces Winston back. You can't fight in bubble because Junker Queen can just walk into it. So this is going to be something that we have to be looking out for with the Junker Queen being piloted by Kalush. But also, Hydron is sticking onto this Soldier 76, and I like this decision because one of the things that it's so good at is negating some of those dives. You can get out really easily, and also you have that continued pressure and control of this high ground. So there's going to be a lot of damage pumped in that New York Excelsior is going to have to deal with before they can eventually dive and try and take this high ground away.
Hydron's been working the legs right now to run him around on this high ground, seeing what kind of value can be brought into this. And again, already just putting so much pressure, getting towards that 25% out the gate. Positional advantage now, Toronto wanting to take it. Still some contention, though, down below from Kellen. Speedily rounding that inner pillar, utilizing the architecture to deny some of the incoming damage while applying pressure. With Hydron looking for a backline. A Helix rocket goes wide, can't quite body the support play as a hack in onto Ultraviolet, but there's still great recovery from the rest of Toronto sticking close, something they've done so well synergy-wise with Kalush on this Junker Queen. And New York is really drawing this out. They've not allowed it to swap over just yet because this patient, organized play, big damage comes in onto Toronto Defiant, but they're able to recover and sustain and force back New York.
Good place from Toronto Defiant, specifically with the rotations around the geometry, right? They know that Fitz is going to try and get into that backline along with Psycho, but the peel has been so good from Toronto Defiant that Fitz, every time they try and translocate and get a hack, they're instantly forced out. I mean, they're only at 56% towards that EMP, when they should be farming it relatively quicker against a Junker Queen composition like this.
Psycho now with the pulse bomb. Ooh, you can see that Speedily went way wide. Unfortunately, could not stick it. Bionid lands now onto Kalush for the moment, but easily topped up once it dissipates, as New York unable to really find an opportunity to capitalize just yet, as the hack onto Hydron now, opting to see if they can eliminate that ultimate stacking up here, already a third of the way through here for Toronto, and Hydron barely survives going into this tack visor, picking up Fitz, who had the EMP, and this is still again a fight win for Toronto.
Yeah, I mean, these fights are so elongated, but if New York Excelsior is not finding the picks, Toronto Defiant just continuously win these because they have the sustainability. New York Excelsior really need to figure out a way to get into that backline and find a pick, whether it's going to be this EMP or a Pulse Bomb from Psycho, because they cannot stand the test of time in these elongated fights. They just will eventually bleed out.
And now 60%, so much has been gained already from really 2 fights only, and not a lot committed into this outside of the tack visor. With a dive in, EMP lands, OG is down, Ultraviolet commits the Kitsune rush, pulse bomb sticks, and Hydron. Sorry, the legs have been broken, the ankles are gone, and now you can see New York press forward with this Primal Rage, continuing to juggle the rest of Toronto around and clean this up to swap it over.
And there we go, that's what I wanted, a little bit more of that proactiveness, right? They use the EMP and the Pulse Bomb directly onto specifically OG, they take him down, Soundbar's not available, but it was a very expensive fight, right? They use 3 very key ultimates, and now Toronto Defiant, they're saying, okay, great, we have 3 ultimates of our own. The Rampage should get a lot of value, especially because there's no defensive ultimate for New York Excelsior to deal with. So New York Excelsior needs to play split here. They don't want to be stacked as 5 and just get instantly wiped by a Rampage.
And they are fully aware of this. Available for the engagement. Slow tempo control down below as the sound barrier comes in. Green means ghost. Gets pulled speedily. sends him to the grave again. Able to get a massive outplay. New York now has to just basically hold this for as long as they can to keep percentage, and now going to get one last attempt with 15% left.
That's a great understanding of your elements right there from the Toronto Defiant. They know that they have an advantage with that sound barrier, so they just tempo aggressively. Rally is being used from Lep just to try and get them back towards the point here. 92% and ticking upwards, but that Rampage is still here from Kaluge. Can they find anything with it? Someone's got a touch, actually.
Diving in, managing to proc the overtime. The nano boost needs to be... Oh no, speedily gets the pickup onto Fitz early. The Rampage comes in onto 3. This is just going to, for sure, be the nail in the coffin onto New York as they isolate the remaining few. Kellen onto the point, able to just juggle for now to keep it into the overtime, back and forth with the assistance of Psycho, but well done overall here from Toronto and the way that they've been able to capitalize on this and not really show any weakness.
Hydron is taken down, though. Kellen did go down. Nano is available from Creative. They will be back in time, but Psycho's not here either, and this is just, I think, desperation at the moment, and no one's going to be able to touch at the very end here. Toronto Defiant are able to win. I think they played this counter comp extremely well, right? They knew that there is no way that New York Excelsior can dive onto them if they're able to peel away that Sombra. They did a fantastic job of that. Fitz didn't really get a lot of value on it besides that one EMP, but at that point, it was like, we had such an advantage because we've taken 2 fights and we're already at 80% that there's really not a way back for the New York Excelsior in that moment. As we go into this match, this is going to be interesting. There's a replay, though, that we'll see from Speed. This is the 2K that they got. Just a perfect stick here right directly onto Lip. Oh,
tick, boom!
I think Lip might have hand-delivered that one back to Creative. That's an unlucky situation there.
If it fits, it ships, and that pulse pop sure did.
It definitely did.
As now we enter onto University, and we're going to have Hydron with the Symmetra. The TP action is coming in. The coordination we've seen before. Oh my goodness! But OG just got vaporized.
OG, I think, flew a little bit too close to the sun there. I think was going really aggressive, and great punish from New York Excelsior, who now are going to be able to take control of these areas here, which is going to be great from them because now they have sight lines specifically for Fitz, who can just continuously pump down this damage. Nice wall, though, to zone off that backline, and the TP actually comes through, so now this is a complete flip of rotation for Toronto Defiant.
And it's something we've seen them do time and time again on these maps of control. Didn't get to see it on the first one, but it is very full proof here on this final map 5 as Hydron gets the additional elimination with the Century turrets to take down Kellen. Despite them giving up a decent early percentage, Toronto is able to capitalize back on it with OG back in the mix, and they now gain percent.
I really love what Toronto Defiant does with the Symmetra, right? When they aren't going up against kind of like this scenario where there's a Hanzo on the other side, when they can just get aggressive, go onto that back line, knowing that they have a little bit of an advantage with their ability to just maneuver around with the Symmetra teleporter. It's something Toronto Defiant is very, very adept at, maneuvering around these fights to give them much more of an advantage in terms of positioning. And now Hydron is close towards that barrier, so this next fight is going to be even scarier for New York Excelsior to get into.
And you can see nice wall separation once again from Speedily, forcing Fitz to take the high ground, almost loses their skull. And the amplification matrix now going to ensure that they force back New York.
Just waiting patiently. They have to wait out this amplification matrix. Now they can come back in with their own one, coming in from Creative as Fitz is taken down really low. Psycho gets way too over-aggressive there and absolutely bodied, and that's a fight lost completely. A huge shatter from Kaluge.
Able to knock everyone from New York on their backs as we've seen before. And again, that crossfire with that overextension was so vital to get rid of Psycho.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that they did on the first control map as well, where they saw Psycho was like trying to be very aggressive, get into good positions for walls, and they're instantly targeting them down. Toronto Defiant holding aggressive here, 60% up and counting. New York Excelsior, with how much time is on the clock right now left for them, they have to use all their ultimates here.
Photon barrier active, dividing the room for the moment, specifically flush with the doorway. Fitz now looking to round the side position with the overclock, but can't quite find too much until they bypass the wall. Kellen rushing forward, Vortex slowing their steps back, but the TP is there just in case to get anyone out. Abandoned ship is met, and Toronto Defiant escape, but they're giving this up for now to look for a re-entry. Kaluge is separated, divided by the wall. They just need to get enough damage onto it, but the healers are doing a stellar job to keep them going. Fitz comes in bigs though, and you do have Kellen as well, removing Speedily with the Vortex.
I mean, a very expensive fight from New York Excelsior. They're lucky that actually Lep died early in that fight because now they have the sound barrier to continuously, hope that they can win a couple of fights in a row to be able to bring this one back. But this is last fight territory for them, and they used pretty much everything to win that one singular fight. Fitz needs to be very careful to not just get randomly shot, because if you lose a fight in the neutral here, it could be absolutely disastrous and the end of the reverse sweep comeback from New York Excelsior.
And we see angles Fitz playing towards the open space, trying to find what they can. The shield is active though. Kaluj with the reposition. Hydron giving them access to it. Wall denies that doorway, but just looking to break it for another attempt. Diving in, turrets out, getting that extra damage. Wall blocks the retreat now from Kellen. The Immortality Field is there, and that sound barrier gives them protection, but Psycho gets Hydron. A numbers advantage again. New York playing this so well right now. Just need to continue capitalizing on this, and things start to look dire here for Toronto.
This time the Psycho aggression pays off. They're able to take down Hydron. That's a lot of the healing gone, and speedily it's taken down too. That's a big pick, and now they're able to win this fight. Ultraviolet has to just get off the map, and 66% up and counting for New York Excelsior, and now they're going to be able, with all the time that they've had and the amount of ultimates they haven't had to use to win this fights, they can match a little bit what what Toronto Defiant's going to have in terms of their own ultimate bank, but Toronto Defiant has an absolute wallet to work with in this last fight.
20% to go. Closing in to reach a third round, going the full distance. Creative looking to take the high ground, has the amplification matrix, and Fitz takes down OG. No sound barrier available for this fight as New York able to outmatch Toronto Defiant. It looked like it was heavily leaning in forward of Toronto out the gate, but they have miraculously taken this back and bring it into a round 3 on this 5th map of Control. Kenobi, we go in the
What?
Hydron?
The sound barrier was there. I mean, the sound barrier was there. Kellen is getting a couple of kills. Kaluj is eventually back into this fight. There's not a... wait, New York don't have their healers, Rich. They do not have their healers in this fight.
Now Kaluj is onto the position. He's going to get so low. Kellen gets the takedown, 2 in the back, speedily looking to flank onto Psycho. Looks for the recall. Ultraviolet dives in, but gets disjointed from the team. So New York is still able to grab it. Oh my goodness, Kenobi.
That was so scary. I mean, Hydron getting those 2 picks, especially on the healers, that was almost a complete just buy back in from Toronto Defiant to win that one, but we're going the distance here onto our last map of Gardens. I believe also, Rich, last time we were in Pro-Am, both of the map fights that we had ended on this map as well. So we're just completely repeating history with the both of us here as we're going into this last map. Fitz on the Sojourn, I think, has been playing so extremely well. The picks that they're able to find, the survivability that they have with the rest of the team around them. If Fitz can continue to match up against Hydron, who is like a very, very talented hit scan, there's a chance that New York Excelsior win this.
And we're not going to see the symmetric play. We saw that last week specifically with Hydron piloting it and utilizing so much mobility to this, but matching it now with the Sojourn and keeping speedily on the Genji is a more of a strong take for them to utilize against this. New York attempting to do what they can to take this now and deny Toronto Defiant with a reverse sweep. Damage completely coming through. Speedily gets the extra damage onto it. It's a 1-for-1 trade, but Kellen is down.
Yeah, Kaluj is still in this fight, so the main tank is available for Toronto Defiant to still walk forward with. Hydron does get antied, but the follow-up is not there just yet, and New York Excelsior need Kellen back into this fight ASAP.
Now, Psycho weaving through the back line of Toronto nicely for the moment. OG gets a pickup onto Psycho as they round the outside. Great opportunity to even further push back New York.
That's a huge pick because with Psycho not in this fight, they can't continuously juggle this point, and now they have to wait for that Tracer to come back into this fight. Toronto Defiant now have all of the angles to play with here. Being able to poke down Hydron and speedily could get a lot of value as New York Excelsior try and move forward.
Kellen keeping point presence. Vortex slows through the window, but still able to maneuver quickly back to that center pillar, utilizing it to rotate around. And OG keeping distance for the time being, nearing that sound barrier to give sustain. Since Kellen, oh, that's a big pickup from Hydron onto Lep. Again, just removing a lot of that extra mobility that's coming through. New York is just rounding the outer position, can't quite get back into the Psycho, looks for a pulse bomb, but can't do anything with it. And another pickup from Hydron.
Hydron's starting to wake up a little bit, and this is a scary situation. You don't want to have Hydron being able to do this, but he does get taken down. Actually, Fitz comes back in with an overclock.
Now, jumping quickly onto the back line, OG gets the sound barrier out, but still have lost 2. Tanks and support. Nade from Creative guarantees that they will not be long for this world.
Oh my god, this matchup between Hydron and Fitz is so good. It's a game of one-upsmanship. 2 boxers, heavyweights, fighting against each other. Who can get the better value? Their Fitz punishes the over-aggression of the Toronto Defiant, and now New York Excelsior have the positioning and angles to work with here, but Toronto Defiant could, with the ultimates that they have, very easily get back into this fight. Left needs to find a way to get sound barrier in time to negate all this incoming damage.
And now Fitz and Hydron going back into another round to duke it out between the two. Is there an opportunity for Fitz to get an early lead? But Hydron with the overclock wanting to find someone. You can see that they dash across the doorway. Can't quite get the shot. Annihilation from Kellen zones back a lot of Toronto Defiant, especially because Hydron's hit by this Bionade as well. Needs to stick close to the Mega to get topped up. Carnage aggressively and slashes through Fix, able to grab them in time with Hydron regrouping to take down Creative.
I mean, this is what we know Kaluge for. Back in last year during the Jotes meta, Kaluge's Junker Queen, absolutely phenomenal in here, just taking so much space, being aggressive and using those commanding shots effectively to help the rest of the team go forward. But it was a very expensive fight for the Toronto Defiant. Luckily for them, by the time we get to this fight, it's going to be in last fight territory for them. Psycho coming up towards a Pulse Bomb, probably going to be looking for someone in that backline. The Suzu from Ultraviolet is going to need to be there to be able to negate some of that incoming damage.
And we'll see if they are up for the task. Psycho in the back, still continuing to get some decent damage. Approaching that Pulse Bomb. Kaluge
oh, that's big.
Fits! They take advantage of it again. The Pulse Bomb isn't going to yield anything here. 10% remains. Toronto Defiant have just put themselves in a prime position.
New York Excelsior have to use this nano onto Kellen to get them onto the high ground. They can't let Hydron sit here up on stand on ceremony to get these rails.
Yep, just still continuing to put in damage. The Disruptor Shop is there for additional support down below. You can see that Kellen is looking to chip away at the damage with the Nano Boost as well, but isn't going to get the Primal Rage. The Sound Barrier from OG leading into this gives the protection. Kaluge is nearing the Rampage, which will be the win condition here. For
Kellen's dead.
Defiant, Hydron gets the shot. This is absolutely impeccable work towards the end of it. Toronto Defiant do not want this to get away from them a second time. It will not be a repeat of the previous week, and now there's just an emergency touch coming in from New York, but they will say no, we will not go down 3.
Toronto Defiant take the W here, but man, are they wiping some sweat from their brow, I think, at this one. This was a very, very close matchup between both of these teams, something that I don't think many of us were expecting going into it. This was kind of touted as Toronto Defiant finally getting their momentum back, being able to take an easy victory almost against this New York Excelsior team. And New York Excelsior came to play. They fought incredibly well against a very, very good Toronto Defiant team. And Toronto Defiant, again, probably just like taking a huge sigh of relief because they're not down 0-3.
Well, and you can see it in the player cams. Like, they know they won, but there was some very tense...
They are stressed. They are stressed.
They are feeling the weight of how close that actually was, and it still calls back. We've said it a couple of times, but we'll mention it again, to what we desperately needed to see from them as commented on the desk, needing this to be clean, and it was very rough through and through, start to finish. And you can see with the score just below me,
it went the distance.
What a first game to start off with.
I mean, yeah, our ritual worked, so we got the map 5 in to start things off here. But I mean, it was so soaked, and I think that there was one person who definitely put this one in the favor of the Toronto Defiant. It's got to be Ultraviolet, player of the match. I mean, unreal performances on that Ana, specifically on those first 2 maps. The sleep darts always there. This one in particular was very impactful, being able to keep Kaluge alive with that upcoming damage. And Ultraviolet, I mean, when they can play this Ana and play it effectively, there's almost no stopping them.
No, they just continue to dominate, and we can take a look at the overall stats specifically of this individual and what they've been able to contribute to it across the board here. And that's why we talk so heavily about the back line and why you always see that they want to try and eliminate them, because they have so much influence to this, and their contribution as a whole is impeccable when you look at the numbers.
I mean, you can see just the amount of enemies slept. I mean, per 10, 6.2 per 10 is a really good amount of just enemies slept. And also, I think the other thing about it as well is the deaths. Only 3 deaths as an Ana. I mean, that means that you're staying alive. And I think OG also deserves a lot of credit for being able to keep Ultraviolet alive, especially, you know, when they're on the Lucio, when they're on the Brigitte, being able to peel for that backline. But yeah, Ultraviolet, definitely for me, deserving of player of the match there. Toronto Defiant, squeak by, I'll say at the very least, squeak by the New York Excelsior at the very end.
And it has been an absolute pleasure to be a part of this first match, but there's so much more Overwatch ahead of us today. Both Kenobi and I had a blast being here with you, but, you know, there'll be others taking it the rest of the way as we're going to head to a break before handing it off to the desk, so don't go anywhere, friends, because there's so much more ahead of you.